The restaurant had gone silent. A billionaire, Richard Hale, known for his sharp suits and sharper tongue, was standing at the counter with a black credit card in his hand. He had just swiped it for the third time. And for the third time, the machine beeped back a single word that no one in the room expected. Declined. People froze, phones half raised, forks clinked against plates. The man who owned skyscrapers, private jets, and magazines with his face on the cover couldn't pay for a dinner bill. Richard's jaw tightened. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He muttered something about bank errors and waved the waitress away, but the whispers had already begun. And then, through the murmurs, a small voice rose. A little black girl, no older than 10, stood just a few feet away with her mother. She tilted her head, studying Richard the way only a child can, direct, unafraid, and devastatingly honest. "Mom," she asked loudly enough for everyone to hear, "how can a man so rich be so broke?" The entire restaurant cracked. Gasps, a few chuckles, and Richard Hale, billionaire, mogul, untouchable giant, went pale. Because what Maya said next didn't just embarrass him, it exposed him. "Sir, do you have another form of payment?" The waitress's voice trembled as she held the little black machine in both hands, like it was a ticking bomb. The entire restaurant still hadn't recovered from the shock. People leaned in, pretending to sip wine but really waiting for what the billionaire would do next. Richard Hale's face stayed stone cold. Years of boardroom battles had taught him to smile through disaster. But his hand clenched the card so tightly the edges dug into his palm. "I said it's a bank error," he repeated, louder this time, as if volume alone could bend reality. "Run it again." The waitress looked helpless. She glanced at her manager near the bar. Mr. Brooks, a heavy-set man in his 50s, shook his head subtly. The machine wasn't lying. The card was dead. And that's when the little girl's words cut through the air like glass. "How can a man so rich be so broke?" Her name was Maya. 10 years old, wide eyes, braids bouncing against her cheeks, and a blunt honesty that spared no one. She hadn't meant it as a joke. She was genuinely puzzled. Children see truth where adults look away. Beside her, her mother, Angela, felt her heart stop. "Maya," she whispered sharply, tugging at her daughter's sleeve. Angela was a single mother, a nurse who had just gotten off a 12-hour shift. The last thing she needed was her daughter embarrassing a billionaire in public. But it was too late. A ripple of laughter spread through the room. Not cruel, but dangerous. Because laughter is the one thing Richard Hale could never control. He controlled headlines, stocks, even politicians. But laughter? That stripped him bare. Richard turned his gaze slowly toward Maya. His eyes, ice blue and sharp, locked on the child. For a brief second, the entire restaurant thought he might explode. But instead he leaned down, just enough so only she and Angela could hear. "You don't know who you're talking to, little girl," he murmured. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "Careful." Angela's protective instinct surged. She stepped between him and Maya, her jaw tight. "She's just a child," she said evenly. "Maybe you should act like an adult." A collective gasp. Nobody spoke to Richard Hale that way. Not CEOs, not mayors, not even senators. But Angela had nothing to lose, and that made her dangerous. At a table near the back, a young woman closed her laptop lid quietly. Elena Torres, 26, freelance journalist, had been nursing a single coffee for hours, hoping for inspiration. She'd just found it. Her recorder was already on, hidden beneath her sleeve. Scandals paid well, and this one had billionaire blood on it. Mr. Brooks, the restaurant manager, hurried over, sweat glistening on his forehead. He knew trouble when he saw it. His establishment couldn't survive a Hale lawsuit. "Mr. Hale, perhaps we can sort this out privately?" Brooks offered, voice low. "If you'd just step into my office." But Richard wasn't listening. He was staring at Angela and Maya, like they were pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite place. Something in Maya's face, in her fearless eyes, struck him with a strange unease. For the first time that night, Richard Hale, the man who owned half the skyline, looked unsettled, and Elena, watching from the shadows, caught it all. She had no idea that this moment, this declined card and a child's blunt question, would unravel the biggest secret Richard Hale had spent decades burying. But she was about to find out. Silence never lasts long in New York. By the time Mr. Brooks tried to guide Richard Hale away from the counter, the whispers had already turned into a storm. Phones were out. Screens glowed. Someone muttered, "Isn't that the billionaire from Forbes?" Another answered, "Yeah, the one with the private island." Elena's heart hammered as she angled her phone just enough to catch Richard's profile. This was gold. Billionaires weren't supposed to bleed in public, but here he was, bleeding out in whispers and shaky camera footage. Richard straightened his jacket, forcing a smile that looked more like a snarl. "Ladies and gentlemen, I assure you," his voice boomed across the restaurant, "this is a temporary technical error, nothing more." His confidence might have worked if Maya hadn't spoken again. "But Mom," she said, louder this time, her eyes wide with confusion, "if he's so rich, why does he look scared?" Gasps. Then silence. Richard froze mid-sentence. That single question sliced deeper than any headline could, because she was right. He was scared. And for a billionaire built on the illusion of control, fear was the one truth he couldn't afford to show. Angela felt her stomach twist. She whispered harshly, "Maya, enough." But the damage was done. The room buzzed again, sharper now, like a swarm of bees. Elena didn't just record, she leaned forward, watching Richard's mask crack. The man who bullied boardrooms and humiliated rivals was cornered by a child. Richard's eyes darkened. He stepped closer to Angela and Maya, his voice dropping to a growl only they could hear. "Teach your daughter to keep her mouth shut, or I will." Angela stiffened. She wasn't rich. She wasn't powerful. But she had spent 10 years surviving on her own after Maya's father died, and no amount of money could buy the steel in her spine. "You threaten my daughter again," she said quietly, "and I'll make sure every camera in this room hears it." Richard blinked. He hadn't expected pushback, especially not from a tired nurse with second-hand shoes and an accent money couldn't erase. At the bar, Mr. Brooks dabbed his forehead with a napkin. He needed this fire out now. "Please," he begged, "this is a family establishment. Mr. Hale, if you'll allow me—" But it was too late. Elena's phone buzzed. Her live stream had gone viral faster than she expected. Thousands were already watching. Comments flew up the screen. "Is that Hale? OMG, his card declined. That little girl just exposed him, lol." Her editor texted one line, "Don't stop recording." Richard finally noticed the sea of phones pointed at him. His jaw tightened. He wanted to snatch them all, smash them, silence the laughter, but he couldn't, not without proving Maya's point, that he was scared. So instead, he turned back to the counter, pulled another card from his wallet, and slammed it down. "Run this one." The waitress obeyed, swiping carefully. Everyone held their breath. The machine beeped again, declined. The restaurant erupted. Gasps, shouts, a few mocking laughs, and then Maya, almost innocently, delivered the line that detonated the room. "Maybe he's not rich at all. Maybe he's just pretending." Richard Hale's face went bloodless. Elena's camera caught it all, the billionaire stripped of power by a child's honesty. She didn't know why Richard looked so rattled by that one sentence, but she would soon. Because Maya hadn't just guessed. She had spoken a truth buried so deep, only one other person in the world knew it. And Richard realized with a chill down his spine that the little girl staring up at him might be far more dangerous than he thought. Richard Hale had faced boardroom coups, hostile takeovers, and senators who wanted to gut his empire. He had never lost, But nothing felt like this. A child's words echoing in his head. Maybe he's just pretending. He wanted to laugh it off. He wanted to crush it under a witty remark. But his throat locked, his mind spun, because the girl wasn't entirely wrong, and that made her dangerous. "Maya, please," Angela whispered again, trying to usher her daughter away. But Maya stood firm, staring up at Richard like she was studying a puzzle. "You look like someone I saw in a picture once," she said softly. Richard's blood ran cold. Angela froze. "Maya," but the girl pressed on, innocent, curious. "Mom, remember that photo you showed me? The one of you at the hospital a long time ago? He looks like—" "Enough!" Angela snapped, her voice cracking. She grabbed Maya's arm, pulling her close. Her eyes darted around, suddenly aware of the crowd, the cameras, Elena's recording phone. Richard's heart slammed against his ribs. A hospital, a photo. He tried to mask the panic clawing at his chest. Did this woman, this nurse, know something? Did this child? Elena, glued to her seat, felt the electricity shift. She didn't know what Maya was about to say, but she knew it mattered. The way Richard had gone pale, the way Angela had silenced her daughter. It was more than embarrassment. It was fear. "Sir," Mr. Brooks interrupted nervously, sensing the disaster spiraling, "we can comp your meal no charge if you'd like to leave quietly." Richard ignored him. His gaze was locked on Angela. "Who are you?" he demanded. Angela lifted her chin. "Nobody you need to worry about." But Richard didn't believe that. His instincts, honed from years of sniffing out threats, told him this woman was something. And her daughter. "Mom," Maya whispered, tugging at Angela's sleeve. "Why is he looking at me like that? Like he knows me?" Richard's chest tightened. He did know her. At least, he thought he did. The eyes, the stubborn tilt of her chin, they dragged him back to a memory he had buried under wealth and concrete. A night he had spent years trying to erase. Elena zoomed in with her phone, catching the flicker of recognition in his face. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a card decline anymore. This was a story with blood, history, and scandal. "Mr. Hale," she called suddenly, standing up, her press badge swinging around her neck. "Care to comment? People are watching. Millions, actually." Richard whipped around, fury flashing. "Turn that off!" But Elena didn't flinch. She knew predators, and she knew fear. Right now, Richard Hale wasn't the predator. He was the prey. Angela pulled Maya toward the door, her voice low but firm. "We're leaving." But Richard stepped in their path. Not blocking them outright, he wasn't foolish enough with cameras rolling, but close enough to intimidate. "You're not going anywhere," he said, voice like ice. "Not until I know exactly what you think you know." Maya, still clutching her mother's hand, looked up at him. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I just know you look like the man in Mom's picture. The one she said I'll never meet." The restaurant went silent. Elena's eyes widened. The pieces clicked. The girl had just dropped a bombshell, and Richard's reaction confirmed it. This wasn't about a card. This wasn't about money. This was about blood. And for the first time, Richard Hale realized the scandal brewing around him might not just ruin his empire. It might expose the one truth he had spent a lifetime hiding. The air inside the restaurant had turned electric, thick with tension no one dared to cut. Forks lay abandoned, glasses half full, but no one moved. Every eye clung to the billionaire and the small family he seemed desperate to silence. Richard forced a smile, but his skin was clammy, his collar too tight. "People make mistakes," he said, addressing the room now, his voice clipped. "Children say things they don't understand." But Angela stepped forward. "Don't you dare dismiss her." Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't. "She speaks the truth better than most adults I've ever met." The room stirred. People whispered, exchanging looks. A billionaire cornered by a nurse and her daughter. It felt like something out of a movie. Elena, phone raised high now, pushed closer. "What truth, ma'am? You said picture. What picture? Who exactly is Mr. Hale to you?" Angela's face hardened. "I don't owe you answers." Richard seized the lifeline, straightening, regaining a fragment of control. "Exactly. This woman is seeking attention. And you—" He turned, pointing a finger at Elena. "You're a bottom feeder chasing headlines. I won't play into it." But Elena smiled thinly. "You don't have to play, Mr. Hale. You've already given me the story. America just watched you panic over a child's words. That's not a headline. It's a confession." The billionaire's nostrils flared. He had built his empire on intimidation, but tonight it slid off his opponents like rain on stone. Angela gathered Maya closer, her arm tight around her daughter's shoulders. "We're leaving," she said again. Her voice was calmer now, steely with resolve. "And if you try to stop us, everyone here will know exactly why you're afraid of a little girl." Maya looked up, confused but unafraid. "Mom, did I do something bad?" Angela's throat tightened. She bent, whispering against her daughter's ear. "No, baby. You told the truth. That's never wrong." But Richard heard it, and it sliced deeper than the laughter ever had. The truth. The one thing he had buried under layers of money, lawyers, and power. A truth with a name. A truth with a face. He couldn't let it surface. Not here. Not like this. "Mr. Brooks," Richard snapped, turning to the manager. "Clear the room. Now." But Brooks shook his head helplessly. "I can't, sir. Too many phones. Too many witnesses. This isn't my mess to clean." And with that, Brooks did something extraordinary. He walked away, leaving the billionaire standing alone in his storm. Richard pivoted back toward Angela, lowering his voice to a venomous whisper. "Do you understand what you're playing with? Do you have any idea what happens if you keep talking?" Angela lifted her chin. "I've lived paycheck to paycheck for 10 years. I've fought for every meal on our table. I've buried my husband and raised my daughter alone. What exactly can you do to me that life hasn't already tried?" Her words landed like a slap. The room hummed with quiet admiration. For once, the crowd wasn't with Richard. They were with her. Elena's fingers tingled as she tightened her grip on the phone. This was bigger than viral. This was history. Maya tugged Angela's sleeve, whispering, "Mom, he's still looking at me like he knows me." Angela swallowed hard, her jaw stiff. She could no longer shield Maya with silence. So she looked Richard Hale straight in the eyes, and in a voice that shook the walls, she said, "Maybe because he does." The restaurant erupted. Gasps, shouts, chairs scraping. Every camera zoomed in, catching Richard's stunned face. He had no witty retort, no clever escape. Because the woman was right, he did know her. And the little girl clinging to her hand wasn't just any child. She was his. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. She was his. The restaurant seemed to tilt on its axis. Cameras shook as people scrambled to capture every second. A billionaire's secret child, dropped into the world by accident, exposed by a little girl too honest for her own good. Richard Hale's face collapsed in on itself. His mask, the one he had built over decades of wealth and power, was gone. For the first time, people saw not a titan, but a man, and he looked terrified. "That's insane!" Richard snapped, but his voice cracked. He tried again, louder. "This woman is lying. She's trying to blackmail me." Angela stood tall, her arm around Maya, her eyes steady. "I don't want your money. I don't want your empire. I only ever wanted one thing, your absence. And you gave it to us." The crowd murmured. The line cut deep. It sounded too raw, too true to be fabricated. Elena felt her pulse race. This was more than a headline. This was the kind of scandal that toppled dynasties. She edged closer, phone trained on Richard's paling face. Mr. Hale, are you denying this child is yours? Richard's mouth opened, then closed. The hesitation was deadly. 1,000 live-stream viewers saw it. 1,000 more joined. His empire was crumbling in real time. Answer the question, Elena pressed. Is Maya your daughter? Richard's hands trembled. He shoved them in his pockets to hide it, but the cameras caught everything. I don't know this woman, he finally stammered. Angela laughed, bitter and sharp. Of course you don't. Men like you never remember the women you use and discard, but look at her. She nudged Maya forward. Look into her eyes. Tell me you don't see yourself. Richard glanced down and regretted it instantly, because the resemblance was undeniable. The curve of her jaw, the stubborn set of her brow, even the piercing blue of her eyes, his signature trait. The room gasped collectively. Elena's voice trembled, half in shock, half in triumph. Oh my God, she looks exactly like him. Richard staggered back a step, his composure unraveling. This is manipulation, a setup. But his words rang hollow. The truth was etched on Maya's face, and no amount of denial could scrub it clean. Mr. Brooks muttered under his breath, shaking his head. He'd seen plenty of scandals in his years, but never one that detonated so fast, so mercilessly. Outside, sirens wailed. The press had already caught the scent. Reporters pushed through the doors, flashes bursting like fireworks. The restaurant transformed into a battlefield of voices, questions, accusations. Mr. Hale, is this your illegitimate child? Did you abandon her mother? Are your finances collapsing? Was the declined card just the beginning? Richard raised his hands, shouting over the chaos. No comment. This is a private matter. But Angela's voice cut through, clear and sharp. You don't get to call it private now, not after you left us to carry it alone. Maya clung to her mother, wide-eyed but strangely calm. She whispered, Mom, does this mean he's my dad? Angela's chest ached. She kissed her daughter's forehead, tears burning her eyes. It means he was supposed to be, but he chose not to be. The crowd roared with sympathy. Phones captured every tear, every tremor. Richard, cornered and trembling, turned on Angela one last time. Why now? Why bring this up? What do you want from me? Angela stared at him. I didn't bring it up. She did. She looked at Maya, her voice softening. Because you can't hide from truth forever. The cameras clicked. Reporters shouted. And Richard Hale, the billionaire who thought himself untouchable, looked like a man drowning. But then, just when the scandal seemed at its peak, Elena caught something no one else did. A flicker in Angela's eyes. A pause in her words. Something unsaid. Elena narrowed her gaze. This wasn't the whole story. Angela wasn't lying, but she wasn't telling everything either. And Elena realized, with a chill of excitement, that the biggest twist hadn't even dropped yet. The room fell silent. The billionaire clutched the bill in his hand, his eyes shining with shame and anger. His companions, who had always been flatterers, now bowed their heads, not daring to say a word. But at that very moment, the little black girl took a step forward, her eyes unusually bright. She said, her voice both innocent and strong, You know, sometimes money can't buy people's hearts, but hearts can save a rich man. That sentence was like a knife cutting straight into the billionaire's heart. He was stunned, not because he was offended, but because he realized that a child had just taught him a lesson he had never learned in his life. The waiter nodded slightly, placing his hand on the girl's shoulder, and the diners in the room stood up and applauded. The heavy atmosphere suddenly turned into an unexpected celebration, not to mock, but to praise the courage of a small child. The billionaire sighed, his eyes red. He took out another metal card from his wallet, the one he always kept in case of emergency, which few people knew he had. This time, the card reader made a crisp beep sound. The payment was successful. He did not rush to leave. Instead, he sat down, turned to the little girl, and said softly, "You just saved me from humiliation. But more importantly, you just saved me from my own pride." And then, in front of everyone, the rich man took out a pen and signed a check, placing it directly into the little girl's hand. Not a few hundred, not a few thousand, but an amount enough to completely change her life and her family's. The whole restaurant held its breath. This reversal was even more dramatic than the initial refusal of the card. An unknown child made a billionaire bow his head, not by his wealth, but by his sincerity. The billionaire's eyes glistened. For decades, people bowed to his money, his power, his name. But now, standing before him, was a child who had nothing, yet offered everything. The room held its breath. Some guests whispered, some wiped away tears. The waitress, the girl's mother, covered her mouth in shock. The billionaire slowly bent down, his pride cracking like glass. His voice, once booming and cruel, was now soft and shaking. "Little one, you've given me something no money in the world could buy: humility." He took the girl's tiny hand, pressing the crumpled bills back into her palm. Then he stood, turned to the stunned crowd, and said, "All my life, I thought I was rich. But today, I finally met someone wealthier than me." The silence broke into thunderous applause. Some people stood, some even cheered, and the man who once terrified the room was now just another human being, stripped of his arrogance. At that moment, no one saw him as a billionaire. They only saw a man who had finally learned what it meant to be poor in spirit and rich in heart. When the party ended, no one spoke of the luxury cars parked outside or the glittering wine glasses on the tables. They only remembered a little girl who stood with courage and a powerful man who finally bowed his head. Life's greatest wealth isn't money, houses, or fame. It's kindness. It's humility. It's knowing when to let go of pride and when to hold on to compassion. The billionaire had spent his whole life buying respect, but that night, respect came freely. Not because of what he owned, but because of what he learned. And the little girl? She walked out holding her mother's hand, unaware that she had just changed a man's life, and touched the hearts of everyone in that room. True wealth is not measured by what we keep, but by what we give. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and share it with someone who needs this reminder today. Because sometimes, the smallest voices carry the greatest truths.